Hello, class. You're in beautiful Hawaii. Haven't been since I was a kid. My kids have never been. I have quite a spectacular view. Yeah, it's the fancy Disney place. And it's fun to look at this and see things like the smokestack over there. And a little rainbow over here. What an interesting juxtaposition. Pollution versus natural beauty. It's the afternoon, just about evening, and you can see here all my weapons of choice. We've got watercolor, camera, sketchbook, and of course what we're going to be using in class, which is digital painting. And this seems to be the way that I travel, whether I'm doing a road trip to a gas station or a rather big trip. So that I'm going to do a recording of a little plein air painting. If you don't know what plein air is, that basically is French for painting outdoors. And it's one of my favorite things to do. I run the Seattle Plein Air meetup group, actually. And it's something that you can do digitally. So let's get started. Let's get started. I'm going to be painting in Krita today, because it's something that I really enjoy. And I know it pretty well. And for me, plein air, a lot of times is about the brushwork. Krita has some really fun brushes. I'm going to make this. Just use some sort of default template. Just to show you what I'm looking at. I'm kind of trapped by my computer, which makes it stars. But I'm looking over here, looking over there. And this hotel just has this intense verticality to it. And I think I'm going to focus on that for my next piece. So I'm going to pick a vertical landscape to work on. I want this to also serve as a bit of an introduction to Krita for those of you who don't know it. First off, a lot of it is going to feel similar. So for instance, a lot of the hotkeys are going to be similar. Spacebar, it lets you pan. Krita has some touch capabilities, so if I touch the screen, I can pan and rotate. Other good ones to know, you'll notice down in the corner I have some hotkeys that are showing up using a program called Karnak. So when I use a hotkey-centric workflow, hopefully you'll be able to tell what I'm doing. So 5 centers your view, 6 and 4 rotate it around. And I try to teach this from a sense that you know Photoshop and you need to know what's different. So let's start with a new layer by hitting Insert. Insert is the hotkey for a new layer. Delete deletes the layer. Control delete. And similar to Photoshop, like Shift Backspace, Control Backspace, fills with foreground and background color. You'll see up here the foreground and background color. And just like in Photoshop, X will switch them back and forth. D will set them back to default, so if I have crazy colors, D sets them back. And there's some other color-specific hotkeys that I really love in Krita. I'm just going to start with some doodles here to show it. So if I hit L and K, it'll go lighter or darker. So this is really handy when you just need to pepper chrome a little bit more light in. Similarly, unlike Photoshop, which has the number line to control your opacity, opacity is just increased or decreased by I and O. And then brackets can increase and decrease size. This brush doesn't have size. I'm going to start by also color picking. So if you use Photoshop, you know that a lot of times in digital painting, the color pick tool is key to this. The same can be done in Krita with a brush, which is holding Control, and you can color pick off of this. I'm going to delete this, and I'm also going to do a technique that I use a lot with plein air, which is minimal layers, minimal brushes, and minimal undo. Sometimes this is functional. I have my webcam on, which is stealing a lot of resources. I'm on a laptop, which doesn't have a ton of power, and also uh, I have to have it plugged in right now. So anything I can do to reduce that footprint is good. I'm going to start by hitting Ctrl U, same hotkey as in Photoshop, and lowering this background. And the idea of starting um, with a sketch can honestly be questionable to me in a planar workplace, because what you have is the elements of time. And if you spend 45 minutes on a drawing, you're not going to have any time to actually do the painting. So a lot of times when I do planar, I dive right in. However, I am going to try and do just a little bit of sketch, but I'm going to try and keep it under 5 minutes. I need to dive into painting as quickly as possible. And oh my god, it is beautiful red over there in the clouds. That's amazing. There's also this like glow coming out of that roof that I'm going to focus on. I think that's the sort of story I want to tell. It's stormy weather, and there's this like touch of red. When you right-click in Krita, one difference is in Photoshop you get a menu. In Krita you get this brush puck, which is similar to other things. I'm going to stick with this and probably just start with pencil. So pencil. Just like in Photoshop also, you can go through what's in your menu right now using the period and comma keys. So eventually I'll be on the pencil that's on that brush puck. There it is. I'm also going to do one other thing. This comes from the Charles Bargue philosophy, which is that you need to have your landmarks in place as soon as possible. And therefore, I'm actually going to use this line tool. Now, this line tool functions just like the brush tool, but it draws with straight lines. And I want this to really just get some landmarks. We're going to go over some of this Bargue stuff. But I love this as a methodology because it focuses a lot more on this idea of where things are going. I could make this perspective exact, but it's kind of on plain air. And just like in Photoshop, you can all shift and you'll paint in a straight line. Now I'm making visual measurements right now. So when I look at this, there's that roof thing. And I'm trying to think about how many of this distance between here could fit into this distance. And it's about a 1 to 2 ratio. So this line here is not correct. It needs to be a little closer. Let's bring in some of that organic element. I'd mentioned this previous in class, but you don't want to use undo. You want to think of this as something where a layer is a series of undo steps that are all consecutive. So what I can do instead is if I need a new layer, or if I want to undo this, I can just lower the opacity of this whole layer and start drawing on top of it. All over again. But again, I'm trying to limit how much drawing time I use here. If you are zoomed in on Krita, and you pan to the side, because you don't have enough real estate, it'll give you this little arrow here which says crop to the amount that I need, which is nice if you're just trying to grow your canvas to the point where you're done with it. So I just wanted a little more space over there. this crop to give me something to work with for some of these perspective elements, but not be so overburdening that it loses that compositional choice. So I think at this point, I'm going to start trying to lay in some colors. And for me, my favorite way to do this, Krita, is with shapes fill. And I'm going to create a new layer underneath this and start working on it. So first 100. A lot of this early lay-in, I'm actually trying to create profiles, by which I mean chunks of stuff that are very clearly one thing or another. Here's another Krita thing that I love, which is you can hit E and you'll switch to the eraser tool. I'm running out of daytime. There's a storm coming, and so I'm gonna switch up my technique. This is the thing that I really love about plein air. When you listen to a lot of great plein air artists, you hear them talk all the time about how time is the number one thing they're fighting against. I wanted to make sure I remember that sort of dark red color in the sky here. This is another brush that I just really enjoy, which is uh, the blending brush. And I like this brush because as far as blending brushes, it's what you see is what you get. You get a little bit of um, it takes a little bit from one color area and a little bit from the other and mixes them together. I'm going to start this line as fast as possible. And a lot of times it's just not dark enough. One other thing that I have done that I really enjoy with Krita is I've modified my hotkeys. So if I show you the settings, configure Krita. It's still recording. You can search for keyboard shortcuts, and there's hotkeys for blue and blue. I don't ever use B for brush because oftentimes when you're doing digital painting, you're on the brush tool, and then you're there for the next half hour. So I actually switched this to make it more blue. That was the only real conflict. The other one was gradient for green. So I no longer get to hit G to go to the gradient tool. Yellow and red. And also saturated. And I have make brush more saturated and less saturated, or more desaturated and more saturated. And that's something that gives me the ability to paint in a really palette-oriented manner. I can just say, well, I wish my color was a little more blue, so I'll hit B and it's a little more blue. And I'll say I want it a little less saturated. And maybe I need a little bit of green in there, so it's pretty intense. I can start just getting coloring real fast. So I'll just do a lot of pepper crumb painting, by which I mean I'll put a stroke down like that. And then somewhere within here is a mixed color. It's kind of where I needed it. As lazy as it gets. So I hit R. That's way too red, right? I'm just trying to get a tiny bit for this wood. Somewhere around here. And that's still too much. Alright. How's it gonna mix with this firelight over here at some point? You gotta have stick-to-itiveness with digital painting. You go through like um, over and over and over. It just doesn't look right, doesn't look right. And you're like, why am I working on this? And then suddenly it just starts popping into place. Um, the other thing about it is like, there's this false difference between drawing and painting. And at some point, drawing is painting and painting is drawing. I should just look at this. And when I see like houses over here on the hill, where it's starting to be like a specific stroke, it's like, you know, there's like details off in the distance. Slowly they add up into a composite that looks correct. You also should feel free to involve your imagination with this too. Don't feel like you're stuck with it. Now, if I have my value scale up here, which goes from white to black, and every so often there's a stop. Uh, there's something called the Munsell color system, which I think was uh, really brilliant in that it made you think about color in its explicit value. Now, when we see this value here, what you might discover is that when you compare something that's actually here to these values, there is nothing in this scene that actually matches these colors. I mean, again, it's starting to get dark and stormy outside, uh, but a lot of times I'll just have this here for a minute, and when I'm looking at stuff, I'll try and look at my source, say, is that too light, too dark? Now, every time you put a brushstroke down, you're kind of just preparing for the next thing that you're going to put down. So this is where this like anti-layer brute force technique comes in. A lot of times it's just a little more freeing. Secret foliage, it's always actually brown and yellow, not green. Black that. There's going to be some brush packs in this week's resources. And when you're doing this plein air exercise, I want you to do it with uh, some of these new brushes. A major part of this is that you need to have an experimental mind. You got to be willing to make a painting that sucks. Um, Otherwise, you'll never make a painting that's good. Um, and so, don't think of it as like if it turns out wrong, you did something that didn't work. Think of it as um, you know, you logged data in your data set, and then you know a little bit more of this stuff. I think sunset is happening. Happens a lot earlier than I thought. I have to paint off photo reference. A lot of this still works. I do love painting with the line tool. So a lot of times, what's going wrong here is that something is, uh, try and put a little color in your clouds. Switch back to the brush. Just gonna run with clouds a little bit. If you really need, you can make a selection or stuff, but I just really, I love the brute force mentality because, what would you do if you were using physical paint? I think that's where a lot of this evolved for me. And I do think of it as a very slow and personal journey. Let me get a more cloudy brush. The RGBA brushes, by the way, in Krita are really fun, just to show these off. If you right click and you click on the tag, you can switch to the various brush ones. And the RGBA brushes will mix color very differently than others. So if I put some green in here, it's just going to mix a lot. I don't know. It has some sort of trick to it that feels like it is a lot more like putting real paint down. So I wanted to make sure I remember this red. The emotion that I felt when I looked at this sky was the red over here. How exciting that was. I wonder if it's not working. So again, you put something down, you move the color around, and you change it again. And there's this specific cloud line that's over here coming off of this roof. So that's what I want to focus on. And you'll note that when I put a stroke down like that, we're only really dealing with three things. The first one is this value scale that we had up here previously. Is it light? Is it medium? Is it dark? Get the value correct, and you're in the clear. The next is placement. That was our line drawing where we started off. I was trying to get that in place first. It's big. Now a lot of it is a matter of edge quality. All these things that we see here in the sky and stuff are just going to be one of two options. It's a hard edge, or a soft edge, or a textured edge. So just go with those. You'll be fine. I'm also going to try and darken this. So like the roof here, that's going to be a dark edge. This is where like lasso painting is nice. I don't have a mouse, and a lot of times lasso stuff's easier with a mouse. I'm going to try and do this entire thing over here. I'm going to hit K for a pepperchrome black. I'm going to hit Control to color pick off of that. Now this philosophy of how to paint realist art is called mimesis. It's the idea that adherence something in reality is like our highest skill set. And you see this today in 3D, like, we're still chasing mimesis with people doing real-time humans and zebra or Unreal and stuff. And by the way, if you're on the brush and you want to switch to the line tool but you don't want to waste time, you can hold V for line and it'll temporarily switch that. And it's also pressure sensitive. Now it's starting to work, right? A lot of what I can do now is, again, we're slowly getting to the point where the cleanup is happening. And this is a amalgamation of two scenes now. One is that initial experience where I had these emotions, and now they're just winging it. It's like pure black, and that's what you have to do with plein air. You have to You can't paint off a photograph and get the same thing. It has to be something where when you do this via um, actually being in the moment, it changes your relationship to the picture. There's this cool little house thing. This would be a good time for shape. So I even at this stage will sometimes go back to the shapes fill brush for the ultimate experience of hard edge versus soft edge. This roof is like the iconic thing here, and now I'm just going and really cleaning it. There's academic techniques here that can be learned. Accurate placement, accurate color, accurate edge quality, frivolousness to your brushwork. Those are all learnable skills, but really nothing compares to the experience of this like plein air doing it yourself. This is so cool. So there's like this orange. I'm gonna start lowering the opacity, and you can use this with the shapes fill brush to like slowly build stuff up. I'm trying to get something that's a little less intense than that. But now that it's nighttime, it's like the glow from this is the most important part. I still need those hard edges. Now, if you want to modify your brush, hit F5 and you can find a lot of stuff like this. Um, it's even better if you're on an actual like brush. Something like this. You can start modifying a lot of these, and they have a little scratch pad where you can try it. So this is like tester area. Maybe that's nice. I should use this down here to get little. It's almost entirely dark outside. I want to focus in on this area though, because this has just this breaking light. Breaking light is a photography term for, and you've got uh, throw in front of your light and it's casting cool shadows. And a throw is a photography term for a thing that's in front of the light. All this jargon. Jargon. It's my buddy. This is the only brush. See that black line? Who cares? I'll fix it. So now this is the area where I'm really gonna focus. Right here. I want this to be right there, maybe a little bit darker. And a lot of times I'm gonna keep using this like low opacity pepper crumb style to get something that is a mix of this black and orange. And I don't want it to be pure black, but I want it to be really close. There's this like, now I'm going to go up to full opacity. Real close to start. Full opacity. I sometimes use a custom palette called, I think it's called Shape. This is all the things that I use when I really specifically want to do shape painting. And this is an example of when this comes in handy. Sometimes you just need hard line edges. I use that. Hold V. Again, I got low memory. Let's just merge all these down. Layers down. We don't need layers. Plain air is about living in the moment. I don't know when do I hit erase. If you hit E, it toggles any brush into eraser mode. So I use that a lot in Krita for getting stuff done without having to switch brushes. I'm going to switch specifically to the line tool because I want to hold shift, which will make it so that my brush always goes in one direction. And then I'm going to start putting in these little ridges. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6. I counted 8 of these. And this is something that you learn doing a lot of perspective work, which is make your life easy. Division is an addition. No artist ever wants sticky keys. So now I got this divided into fourths. Click and hold shift. And now these all have these littler lines inside there. I'm just gonna eyeball these. Ooh, I'm feeling rain. It's got this radiating element to it. Now again, like hard edges versus soft edges. I know where my hard edges are, and I know that some of them go along here. And it's just silly to get worked up about, oh no, I'm painting over my stuff. All the time, I'll do something like this because see over here where now my black area, my black edge of the roof is wrong. Look, we just go back over stuff. And this is where I think painting with real paint is really a beneficial workflow because it teaches you to never go backwards, always go forward. Let's talk soft edges. This cloud I laid in using my RGBA brushes and painting rather aggressive touches. this is a style that really appeals to me. A lot of the artists that I have fallen in love with over the years painted in what is sometimes thought of as the direct style. People like a lot of people out of the American school of illustration, such as N.C. Wyeth and Howard Pyle and Frank Schoonover. Uh, and I think it's because, like, in America, a lot of we didn't have academies and we didn't have like storied tradition to our art. Um, we occasionally like put some effort into making that up, but a lot of times it's a place that was um, where all the talent was. And honestly, if you look at American history, maybe it was even like the least ethically problematic. Was commercial art. People making stuff for the dawn of print, where coming out of Chicago, you have a lot of that stuff. Throw a. I occasionally will use my hotkeys for RGB or yellow, RGB Y, um, to just throw a rogue color in there. Just think of this as there's a measurement in painting called a pepper crown, which is when you have just a little bit of oil on the tip of your brush, and it mixes in, and by the time it mixes all the way in, um, it looks fine. You can see a little bit of that. Totally soft enough. I'm gonna switch back up to the blending brushes. Like these. Blending brush won't necessarily add colors. I love this hard. This is my favorite brush. I say this about every brush in Krita. They're all my favorites. They're like my children. They're like my students. They're all my favorites. Um, but I don't want to overdo it because I like this brush stroke. I just want just enough that I feel like I can get away with it. Plus and minus, zooms in and out. I think at this point, a lot of what I end up doing is going back, just buffing out my line art. Especially for these mountains. Go back in. Well, that's just for now. All these little line art marks buffed out. So I color pick right next to it. Basically erase it with the nearby friend. So go hard edges into soft edges and soft edges into hard. I'm kind of over blending here because I know now going in. There's more rain. It doesn't rain tomorrow too. So this is a really I'll brush that. Hit in mirrors. What have I lost? Look how awesome that red in the clouds that I like so. What I like about clouds, cloud edges, is they have this tendency to go, you know, hard edge, you're following along with it, and then it gets wispy. Sometimes that RGB trick for the hotkeys like can't cross the whole color wheel, so you have to if you want it to be yellow, you have to hit R for red. And I'm overdoing this because I know that I'm gonna then underdo it. Now, if I push really hard, it'll get a lot of that color out. If I push, I think that's gonna look green. If I push soft, it'll use the color that it's next to. And then with that, you basically have everything you need going in and out. So I like how this cloud line goes in. I want this to maybe. Oops. And glare. Why do I know that? Well, earlier I was looking at the cloud. That's what it did. So nature is your best teacher. This wasn't there, but it was the emotion I was going after. I saw this and thought, what is it about this landscape that I like? So a lot of times I press hard for 1 sec, and that gives me that pepper crumb of color. I'll draw. Well, it doesn't look awful. This green might be a little aberrant. So I can use blend modes. Switch to C, which so similar to Photoshop, Alt Shift M sets your brush mode to multiply. Alt Shift S sets it to screen. Alt Shift N sets it back to normal. Alt Shift C sets the color. So sometimes like this cloud's pretty fine. I just want it to be blue, but I don't want to overdo everything. So I'll set my brush mode to color. I don't think that actually worked at all. It's not actual. So now I can sort of just use this blue that I color picked and just tone down that green a little bit. Some of this red too. So now I'm not overall messing with it, just messing with the one thing that needs fixing. At this point, I'm going to try and love some of the shape. I don't know. It's black out. I'm going to finally use another layer for merging all that down a long time ago. I'm going to go back to my shape tag. E for pitch black. Bring up some of those edges. Some of those. Maybe add some modeling. Like batch. Some of that texture in. The trick with this is like you kind of only do it one time. The more you touch it, the worse it gets. Same thing I did previously, where I switched my color blending mode, and my blending mode to color, and I added, I tried something. Sometimes I like it, sometimes not. While I'm doing this, we got here and we've not been on a family vacation in a long time. We've done little things like camping, but that doesn't really count. I'm gonna pause my recording here, call it a night because got the spinny death wheel. So I'm gonna give Krita back some rain by putting this video. Hope this was a useful demo, and I hope you go outside and enjoy yourself with some plein air. Good night.